Need to move down some?
I can go right here.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll just keep this one. It's the same problem.
Okay.
But thank you so much thanks for running to get it.
You're welcome.
So ladies and gentlemen, what this means is that at a certain point I'm going to have to switch my little audio interface from my phone to here, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But let me see, get this going in the background here for us.
Wow, what a picture.
Beautiful picture. That's from my next month's lecture for y'all. I'm doing a lecture on Martha Graham and Appalachian Spring. That was a picture of Martha Graham and her husband for about 10 years or so. But we'll talk about that next time.
Okay. We'll wait in anticipation.
Wait in anticipation. We love it.
I saw Oklahoma and Carousel the other day.
Did you really?
Yes, they were on TCM.
Wonderful. Well, what's interesting, so those, the Oklahoma, I assume, and what was the second one you saw?
Carousel.
Carousel. I assume they were the movie versions from like the 50s and 60s. Appalachian Spring, next month, we're going to watch the televised production from 1958, although the original was in 1944. We'll discuss all that. Howdy, come on in, come on in. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard a little bit of music while you were making your way in. It is orchestral music. If we go through our musical listening points, the period is the Romantic era. Orchestra is smaller. We definitely got an orchestra. A lot of intensity. We'll talk about what fed the intensity of this particular composer. The name of this particular piece is Symphony No. 4 by Pytor Ilyich Tchaikovsky. And Tchaikovsky will be the focus of our deep dive today. Now, when I say Pytor Ilyich Tchaikovsky, or just Tchaikovsky, what are your associations?
Nutcracker.
Nutcracker, exactly right. Now, why is that such a big deal for us?
It's a cash cow.
It's a cash cow! I love it. Yeah, it's all over the country. It's a cash cow all over the country. Every major ballet will put on this production of the Nutcracker. Now, why? Why would they do that?
It's popular.
It's so popular. Why is it so popular?
Because people can go and watch it and understand it.
I love that. The accessibility of the Nutcracker.
Yeah.
It's a Christmas time fantasy story, right? Tchaikovsky
And
was...
a lot of kids can be cast in it.
That's a great point. Absolutely. A lot of children running around. Herr Drosselmeyer while he's being all stern. And then, what is it? The fairies. And anyway, it's a beautiful, fantastic story. By extension, Tchaikovsky is very, very well known as being the foremost ballet composer during the Romantic era. Tchaikovsky,
Really?
yes, absolutely, absolutely. He is to ballet as Mozart is to opera. Tchaikovsky what other ballets do we know that Tchaikovsky wrote?
Sleeping Beauty.
Sleeping Beauty, exactly right. Swan Lake. And there are many others. What's going to be a little bit, how do I say, what's very unique about this presentation is that we're not going to talk about his ballets at all. He is most known for them, but we're going to delve into works that are more deeply biographical. The title of today's presentation is Fate and Forbidden Love. And we're going to explore pieces of music that tell the story, that tell Tchaikovsky's story about forbidden love and how he was grappling with fate until the very end. But
Which
his
one
story,
was that?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes?
Which one is that play?
In the background, this is the first movement of his fourth symphony. And we're going to be listening to that symphony in depth later in the presentation
The
too.
third movement to the fourth.
Yeah, first movement of the fourth symphony, and I'll show you guys later too.
We are not going to play it, right?
You've played it? Oh, I'm going to play it. Yes, I'll be playing it for you.
Okay.
I'll turn off the volume here. Tchaikovsky was born in 1840 in Russia. His parents were both professional, and his father and mother really wanted Tchaikovsky to pursue not only being a well-rounded, educated person, but to be a lawyer eventually. He showed incredible promise through music at a very young age. I think he was around 5 years old when he and his sister composed a piece of music. Now I'm going to do a tiny little tangent about the significance of the sister. What other composers have had remarkably talented sisters?
Mozart.
Mozart, exactly right. Nadia was a huge influence on baby Mozart. When Father Mozart, Leopold, when he took the family on tour, it wasn't just the baby Mozart show, it was the Nadia and Wolfgang duo. Nadia had incredible talent, but she was, discouraged. She was discouraged from pursuing music because she needed to pursue domestic abilities and being a good wife. Who else? You guys heard this little ditty?
Brahms. Yeah.
It's actually Mendelssohn. Mendelssohn borrowed from Brahms, but yes, Mendelssohn, he had a sister named Fanny. And Mendelssohn is a early to mid romantic era composer, German. He was in a very, very fortunate situation where his parents could afford tutors. And the tutors, they would document how Mendelssohn's sister, Fanny, was actually more talented. More talented than the boy. Now, this pattern, I think Webern also had a sister, and it kind of sheds light onto the old adage, behind every great man is a greater woman. Now, I know that we usually contextualize that by, a partner, like who you're married to, But I think what is so intrinsic is that brother-sister relationship and how that can cultivate, how each person in that relationship can help cultivate each other's gifts. It's a shame, however, that the sisters of history have been cast aside. And I hope that now we're able to be in a society that brings our sisters to the forefront, as opposed to being the pivotal figures influencing the males.
More real than a footnote.
Exactly, more real than a footnote. Can I use that for one of my lectures?
Sure.
That's brilliant. More real than a footnote. We have Tchaikovsky, who was able to reap the benefits of having a beautiful family life. When he was 17 or so, he was enrolled to, I guess it's basically like, you have a pre-doctor med school, I can't remember the term for it, but basically you go to this particular part of college if you want to pursue getting a medical degree. You have the same type of thing for law. He really tried, and he was a really good boy. Like, he wanted to please his parents. And unfortunately, he couldn't stay away from music.
Couldn't stay away from what?
From music, yeah. And so he enrolled in the St. Petersburg Academy, and the rest is history. We're going to actually jump a little bit later into his biography. Oh, here's a nice picture of Mother Russia. And we're going to talk about the year 1878. The year 1878 was a crisis moment for Pytor Ilyich Tchaikovsky. He had started to prove himself as a composer. However, his personal life was at a critical tipping point. Tchaikovsky was gay in Russia during a time when being gay was taboo. Now, it is taboo today to be gay in a lot of cultures. In Russian Orthodox culture, it was absolutely, taboo is a very kind word for it. That having been said, he was still encouraged to produce the most incredible music, and it was probably known. It was probably understood that he was gay, but people would choose to ignore him. Tchaikovsky, however, was racked with guilt. And so in late 1877, he decides to try to cover up being gay, and he marries a student of his. Now, I think the student had graduated, and she professed that they had a great relationship, a great student-mentor relationship while she was in school. He actually didn't remember that. But, this poor woman, she tried her best to be the support for Tchaikovsky, but he couldn't handle it. I think the marriage lasted all of maybe a couple months. And then he actually tried to commit suicide by jumping into the Moscow River. It was a very, very tough time for him. 1878 would be a point of reflection and kind of just reconciliation. What am I supposed to do with this? During that time, he strikes incredible friendships with two people. And these two people will be the focus of our fate and forbidden love exploration. The forbidden love was this gentleman right here, Iosef Kotek. Iosef Kotek was a brilliantly endowed violinist and composer. He would actually teach Kotek, Tchaikovsky would teach Kotek during his tenure at St. Petersburg. And after Kotek graduated, then a relationship was created. However, that relationship was a spiritual, intellectual, and musical connection. Kotek was not gay. Now, he potentially in our times would have been considered maybe bisexual had he had the opportunity to explore. But all accounts say that Kotek was musically and spiritually and intellectually connected to Tchaikovsky, but there was no sexual interaction. This was so equal parts enlivening and debilitating for Tchaikovsky because he had found somebody with whom he was truly in love. He actually wrote to his brother Modeste and said, "I am in love with this man." In 1878, these two decide to elope. A spiritual, musical, intellectual elopement, and they go to Switzerland. And it is in Switzerland that one of the most beautiful violin concertos was conceived. They went in March of 1878, and they would, initially the violin concerto wasn't a thought. Tchaikovsky really just wanted a time and space to clear his psyche. So Kotek was like, let's play music. And they would perform all the violin rep. There's one piece in particular that I'm going to highlight. It's not really worth remembering, but it influenced this moment. It was a piece called Symphony Espagnole. Now, Symphony Espagnole is a French rendering of Spanish passion. And it sparked something in Tchaikovsky. It inspired Tchaikovsky to write the concerto you are going to hear today. The tragedy. I'm sorry, yes?
I think I missed something.
Mhm.
How are we done this forbidden love with Tchaikovsky?
Well, because Tchaikovsky was in love with, oh my gosh, you're ahead of the game. You're ahead of the class. I was just about to tell you why this is, what makes it forbidden. Tchaikovsky, he could not dedicate this concerto to the love of his life. Because if the rest of the world found out that he was gay and he wanted to spend the rest of his life with this beautiful soul, it would have dire consequences for him. So he could never come clean. He could not dedicate the violin concerto to Kotek. Kotek could not be involved for both of their sakes, for the safety of Kotek's career, for his life, and for Tchaikovsky's. The violin concerto would be dedicated to two other people, one of which is a violin pedagogue extraordinaire. His name was Leopold Auer. He taught a little-known violinist by the name of Jascha Heifetz. I'm being a little bit glib here, but he is seen as probably one of the foundational fathers of violin technique. And Tchaikovsky was like, well, you're just about as good as anybody. I'll dedicate this to you. Leopold Auer initially said, absolutely not. This concerto is not idiomatic, and it doesn't work. It's too flamboyant. Now, there's another violinist by the name of Adolf Brodsky, and Brodsky would then champion this piece. It was Brodsky who, as a result of championing, would change the world's opinion, and Leopold Auer would rescind his criticism and make this violin concerto a pillar of technique and repertoire for any of his students. We're going to now listen to the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto, the first movement. Two notes. The first, this concerto is extremely Tchaikovsky, but it is also extremely Mozart. You hear moments of Mozart. Now, why would you hear moments of Mozart? Because Tchaikovsky was inspired. He loved Mozart's music so much. Mozart was known for creating these beautiful, languid, florid, lyrical lines. You will hear that in this concerto, and I urge you to listen for it. You're going to hear me trying to sing like a baritone. You're going to hear the you'll hear it, I promise. The other note is that today I will be performing with artificial intelligence. I have an app on my phone that will be accompanying me as I perform for you today. This is my launch of that type of performance. I usually find a YouTube clip and I play with that. This is going to enable me as a performer to interpret the work in a way that is genuine to me and genuine to you, as opposed to having something that's a little bit more formulaic. I just want us to reflect a little bit on how this little box is going to adapt in the way that human beings adapt to making music in the moment. It's a pretty beautiful and profound thing, if you ask me. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to sit back, relax. Well, maybe not relax, because this is a time for reflection. This piece is so full of love and human expression, and I hope that you are able to glean some of that from this performance. And that's where we have to stop that for now. Are we able to hear the love in that piece? Are we able to hear the torment in that piece? There's so much of the human condition there. Yes?
You said is the fourth symphony?
This one
The
right
fourth
now is the
concerto.
violin concerto. This is the violin concerto, yes.
And is the third movement?
This is the first movement. This is the first movement of the violin concerto.
You know something, and
Yeah.
while you were playing this so wonderfully, I was seeing some association with Beethoven. Were they friends or contemporaries?
Influences, that's an excellent question. So
And this is the first time I had that feeling.
that is really interesting you say that, because Tchaikovsky would actually, you're ahead of the game once again, he would borrow and he would be heavily influenced by Beethoven in writing his fourth symphony. Now, I think he obviously studied Beethoven. Beethoven was one of the pillars of study if you were in school. What you probably heard was Beethoven's, he would, in his violin concerto, he would use something called arpeggios, which is when you do do, mi, so, right? So, they're arpeggios, or do, mi, so's, all over the place. And one other thing that Beethoven does so brilliantly that Tchaikovsky most likely did do, Beethoven used something called a motive. And a motive is like a small musical idea. It's not quite a melody. It's more like, I guess you guys have probably heard this before.
Depressing.
Right. Depressing, I love it, right. Now, that's interesting. You are able to internalize a feeling with that musical idea. Tchaikovsky did something very similar. He would start out his, it almost feels like ba-yum, bum, that musical gesture, that lift, that tiny little. It's a beautiful way to start off a melody, but really, motivically, what it's doing is it's getting us to feel like we are basically existing with bated breath. So I totally understand why you would feel that this has some Beethovenian elements in it. That's an excellent question. Thank you so much for asking. That is a beautiful segue. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I did not pay him to be this little, how do I say this, what is it, a planted man in the audience. But we're actually going to talk about now fate and how Tchaikovsky dealt with and reconciled with fate. The notion of fate, the idea of fate, was focused on highly by intellectuals, musicians, artists, etc., since antiquity, really. But it really became a focus post-Enlightenment, because the Enlightenment basically was this intellectual movement to enable all of us to think critically, right? How does fate fit in that? How can we have fate while still having these intellectual tenets, that help us self-actualize in a way that human beings had never self-actualized before? This paradox plagued Tchaikovsky. He was the epitome of that paradox. He was a musical genius, but he was not able to love the way that he wanted to love.
Pobrecito.
Pobrecito, indeed. Yes. And, you know, life is not always kind to lovers, we know that, but this symphony was composed after the violin concerto. It was inspired by another, oh my gosh, monumental person in his life. If Iosef Kotek, if he was the inspiration for the concerto, you have a woman named Nadia von Meck, who would be the inspiration for many works thereafter. Nadia von Meck was actually a patroness. She had married into an incredibly rich family. By the time all things were said and done, she had 18 children.
Oh my God.
I know. Oh my God, I know.
God bless America.
God bless. Yeah. Oh my goodness. God bless mothers.
Oh.
God bless mothers. And America too. But you have this woman who was she was a wealthy patroness. Her husband had died, unfortunately, and as is pretty common in that social strata, if you have a lot of money, you tend to gravitate towards people with a lot of talent and a lot of accolades. Sometimes you even pursue friendships with specific type of people. Like Jeff Bezos, I'm sure he's really good friends with some of the best artists, musicians, athletes in the world. Nadia von Meck had a friendship collection of some of the most incredible minds during the 1870s. And Tchaikovsky turned out to be one of the crown gems in that collection. They met, or they were introduced via letter, I think in 1877, and their relationship was immediate. Tchaikovsky found an intellectual spirit with whom he could share everything. There was no judgment. He was an open book with von Meck. It turns out that one of the conditions of their friendship, however, was that Tchaikovsky could never meet von Meck in person. She refused. Now, I had somebody say, well, you try having 18 kids and hanging out with a handsome man. I was like, oh, well, okay, well, maybe that's a thing. But von Meck, she would consistently provide an allowance for Tchaikovsky for the better part of 12 years. If it weren't for Nadia von Meck, we wouldn't have the huge voluminous output, because Tchaikovsky, during the years 1877 around till 1890, he would have had to work. He would have had to teach children, which is very taxing. I don't know if you guys are teachers, but I don't think any society, maybe, I don't know. I don't want to paint with too broad of a paintbrush here, but I feel like, at least in America, we do not pay our teachers enough to cultivate the minds and the bodies and the spirits of our future generations. And it takes a lot. It takes a lot. And Nadia von Meck, she knew this. And she realized that Tchaikovsky was not meant to be a teacher. Tchaikovsky was meant to be a composer. In the early 1880s, their correspondences would evolve, and Tchaikovsky would start saying something to the effect of, I am writing your symphony, Nadia. And Nadia was like, wow. Tchaikovsky was inspired by two elements to write his fourth symphony. The first was Nadia. Nadia had been an incredible support for him. The second was this notion of fate, because he felt like he was living that paradox. He was probably, if not the genius composer in the world, certainly one of them, and he couldn't pursue his own love interests. He could self-actualize, but not really. The Symphony of Fate is basically Tchaikovsky trying to reconcile with not having the power of being an enlightened person. Fate still takes control. There is an inevitability to our course of life. Now, there was another composer who created a symphony that very much highlighted the influence of fate. And that's our friend who wrote this little ditty. That is the motive from Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. And that Fifth Symphony is supposed to be fate knocking at the door, reminding us that our lives are really not in our hands. Tchaikovsky would write a symphony that would incorporate that element, that reflective element. What is fate? Fate is just, we can't escape it. As well, it would incorporate these beautiful florid melodies that I believe reflect his relationship with Nadia. It is a beautiful symphony. We'll listen to the first movement. And while we are listening, I want us to think about the intensity of the music, because it is intense. It starts out with this incredible fanfare, this brass fanfare that is supposed to represent fate and the inevitability of what is to come. It comes it starts at the beginning, and then it comes back to remind us, oh, don't you get too excited now, because you are destined. You have a different destiny. With that, here is Tchaikovsky Symphony No. 4. I need to reconnect my computer to my speaker, but if you guys have any questions, scream them out. All right. Quiet crowd. Very good. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Here is Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony, first movement. I'll try that again. My speaker didn't connect. Sorry, 1 second.
Listening, but I'm listening with my eyes shut. I really am listening. I really am listening to every word, but I've got my eyes shut.
Here we go.
So am I.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Fourth Symphony by Pytor Ilyich Tchaikovsky. Thank you for your patience. 1 second to do a little. Talk about intense. This symphony would cement Tchaikovsky's reputation as a serious composer. This music, it extends from just the entertaining ballet. This is real intellectual, spiritual music that really grabs us and asks us the question, why? Who are we? What are we doing? Tchaikovsky would grapple with fate until the rest of his life. His sixth symphony, his Pathétique, is seen as an iconoclastic piece, and we're not going to listen to it, but I would recommend you listen to it. In the same way that Beethoven, talk about a through line, in the same way that Beethoven, in Beethoven's last symphony, completely changed the symphony forever. He basically created this last movement with a chorus, which had never been done before. Tchaikovsky, with his last movement of the Sixth Symphony, he would make it a lament. And that really had a profound effect on its listeners. The autobiographical content is basically, it is painfully clear. Tchaikovsky wanted us as the listeners, in his crowning achievement in the symphonic realm, to reflect on the pain of fate. How no matter how hard we try, we will suffer. That having been said, Tchaikovsky's life was filled with incredible music, incredible friendships. We hear this music and we hear the beauty, and it has lasting power. Not only do we have the Nutcracker, but we have the 1812 Overture. We have all of his his piano concerto. His music will stand the test of time because of the humanity that is present in it. Not only do we have this paradox of fate and forbidden elements of control, but we have beautiful humanity. And I hope that moving forward while you're listening to Tchaikovsky, you will hear that and revel in the greatness and the glory and the sadness and the love. With that, the end. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Next month, we will be exploring Appalachian Spring. Appalachian Spring is probably one of the most influential ballets of the 20th century. Specifically with an eye on Martha Graham, who is the choreographer and the genius to assemble all these brilliant people to create one of the most iconic ballets to ever happen, not just in America, but period. Throughout the course of the year, we'll also do a cross-section of the orchestra where we'll explore every instrument that you'll see. We'll also have this is probably my favorite lecture to date. I eat this content up. However, I'm very excited to present in either October or November a presentation on exoticism in music. That's basically like, you know how people wear Hawaiian shirts and it's really fun, right? Like the Hawaiian shirt, it's exotic to most normal Americans because we're not running around with colorful shirts, right? The exotic element in music is so pervasive and it's exciting, and there's a history of it, and I want to share that history with you. We'll also be exploring the music of French composer Camille Saint-Saëns. And Saint-Saëns was Carnival of Animals, exactly right. This man talk about an animal, he was a chameleon. He was one of the formative French composers that helped people like Debussy and Ravel create the French sound. However, Saint-Saëns, he was a master of all of the genres in music. And so we're going to listen to some of his pieces and explore his genius. And that's all we get for today for teasers. But ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to seeing you next month. I think we'll be at a different time. I think we'll be at 10:30 in the theater room. However, is this a good time for you? Is this a good time for most of you guys to be here and to be, yes? Okay, so then I'll talk to Jennifer about, whether or not this is a better time, because I've come a couple other times and I think we have a much better audience today, which is great. I'm very excited for that. But anyway, stay tuned. The next lecture we have is supposed to be in the theater room at 10:30, but we'll make that a TBD. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
But I could see it being for Russia too, the fate of Russia. They're going through a bad time now, getting all the border wars they're having.
You're saying in a context for now or during then?
Then.
Right. Oh, that's a great point.
And
They were trying to
even having the ruler with the Tsar coming down with.
I need to incorporate that next time I present this. I think that's because he was very patriotic.
Yeah.
He was extremely patriotic. Hence his writing in 1812.
I've got a, well,
You heard some of that in here.
You do in the violin concerto. You hear it in.
Well, I was thinking of the trumpets.
Yes, the fanfare of the Fourth Symphony. That's huge. That's huge.